Welcome back. Now, while some are taking to the streets to support KZN Provincial Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, others will be waiting to have their say at the upcoming Commission of Inquiry. Last night, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that Acting Deputy Chief Justice Mbekezeli will lead the inquiry into the allegations made by Mkhwanazi against Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. For more on that inquiry, perhaps a little bit more on what to expect as well, we're joined by Judges Matters Mbekezeli Benjamin joining us then as well. Mbekezeli, thank you so much for the time. Let's get your immediate reaction here to this, Commission of Inquiry, especially considering that it was the Judiciary as well that was named by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi.
Good afternoon, Arabile, and good afternoon to the viewers. As Judges Matter, we welcome the commission, and we look forward to seeing it work and get to the bottom of some of the allegations that were made by General Mkhwanazi. Because, Arabile, they are quite serious allegations, especially those including magistrates and possibly judges having been in some sort of collusive relationship with people who are alleged to be involved in criminal activity. And unfortunately, it undermines the administration of justice and the rule of law generally to have these allegations swirling in the air without them being addressed. And so it's great to see that there is a commission of inquiry that is set up to deal with these allegations. As for the latter part of your question about whether what can we expect since the judiciary was investigated? Well, look, we can look to history. The Zondo Commission did quite an extensive investigation into allegations of corruption and state capture. And there were 2 judicial officers that were named in the final Zondo report. And since then, there's been concrete action taken against those 2 judicial officers. And so we should expect from the Nhlanhla Commission similar action being taken if there are any judicial officers that are alleged to also be involved in the allegations as set out by General Mkhwanazi.
So you feel that the amount of independence, the amount of integrity shall remain despite the judiciary itself? I mean, imagine then you were to investigate yourself for something that you are said to have perhaps been a part of, allegedly, of course, then. Would that not actually be counterintuitive? You should not be necessarily doing that, considering that you are investigating yourself here.
So there are 3 members of the panel as announced by the president. 2 of them are practicing lawyers, and only 1 is a judge. So if there are any allegations against judges or magistrates, if there's any question whether the judiciary will seek to protect itself, well, there are 2 lawyers who are in the majority who can overrule any such, aims to protect the judiciary. And so I don't think that we should worry at all that they will not be able to get to the bottom of any allegations against the judiciary. But more importantly, the 3 people named as in charge of this commission of inquiry are 3 senior experienced legal minds. Justice Nhlanhla, for example, has been involved as a lawyer in commissions of inquiry. He was the evidence leader in the Marikana Commission. And since then, he has spent the last 12 years on the Constitutional Court, the highest court in the country. And so he has an in-depth understanding of the judiciary and how the law functions and how investigative processes work. Similarly, the 2 lawyers, Advocate Sesi Baloyi and Advocate Sandile Khumalo, they themselves are senior members of the Johannesburg Bar. Their integrity is beyond any question. And so I have full faith that they will do a thorough investigation.
There'll be a lot of eyes on this, though, Mbekezeli. There certainly will be, especially the amount of scrutiny that will certainly be on this then. How should the allegations against any members of the judiciary then be properly investigated thoroughly so that, one, you make everybody that is at home, all ordinary South Africans, even those then in the presidency, including the president, of course, let's call it happy, without compromising necessarily South Africa's judicial independence?
Well, what we would call for is for the commission to prioritize the allegations against the judiciary. They should put it as their first priority to get to the bottom of those allegations, not only because the judiciary is a smaller entity than, for example, the police or any other security services. They are a smaller entity. they are more able to be investigated, but also because General Mkhwanazi made specific allegations that it was judicial officers, possibly in the province of Gauteng. So there's quite a narrow focus that can be done, and we expect that in the first interim report, which is due in the next 3 months, the allegations against the judicial officers should be dealt with and possibly referred to the Judicial Service Commission and the Magistrates Commission for further action. And so we do think that because of the nature of the judiciary, it's much easier to get to the bottom of the allegations. It's easier to deal with them and get a thorough investigation going. And if there aren't any substantiation to the allegations, then again, it helps to clarify those, because you can't, for example, let allegations like this linger against an institution like the judiciary for long. So we support the call by the Chief Justice last week to say, if there are any sort of allegations about the improper conduct of judges or magistrates, those should be brought forward as quickly as possible so that they are dealt with, because the judiciary really trades on its reputation. And so there is sort of an incentive to get that reputation cleared up as quickly as possible.
Delicate, intricate, difficult, intertwined, all the words that you could possibly find to speak about the complexity of this investigation. However, is 6 months enough?
Well, look, it depends really on what the commission gets down to. In previous occasions, unfortunately, commissions of inquiry have sort of turned into mini trials. And that's not the intention of commissions of inquiry. The idea behind a commission of inquiry is that it should be inquisitorial. So that means it must take an active role in getting to the bottom of the allegations. It should lead the investigation and sort of run to look for all the evidence that is out there. It doesn't need to do a conclusive investigation because, again, it can't take any disciplinary processes. It can't take any criminal processes. What it should do is to say that, look, there are preliminary facts that support a further investigation. And especially when it relates to the judiciary, what should happen is that they should go, for example, to General Mkhwanazi and say, you made allegations that there were certain judges or certain magistrates from Gauteng that are involved in these criminal activities. Please provide us with those facts. And in the interim report, they can say, these are the facts, this is the evidence. The JSC or the Magistrates Commission should then do an in-depth investigation, including suspending the judges or magistrates that are implicated. That is really how it should work. So 6 months can really go a long way if you intend to do an inquiry and not a full-blown trial.
I mean, you'll excuse us if we're perhaps a little bit shaky with regards to believing that it really could happen in 6 months because of history in itself as well, which is exactly the history you've alluded to in this conversation too. If the decision is not, or if the inquest itself is not meant to be conclusive in its decision-making, conclusive in its understanding, how then can you offer the right kind of recommendations which can see corruption being rooted out, which can see, and I'm not saying that this inquest should ultimately see people definitely go to jail, but the recommendations themselves are pivotal to what then gets done by the president.
Yes, the recommendations are absolutely important, but we should remember, Arabile, that there are state institutions that are mandated to do certain investigations. For example, if you want to get people arrested and put in jail, a commission of inquiry will not give you all of the evidence that you need because a criminal process requires a heavier amount of evidence. What a commission of inquiry should do is to say, look, there is a prima facie case. There is a way in which the evidence is pointing in a certain direction. The Hawks, the NPA, should then take over and do a proper criminal investigation if there are criminal allegations. Similarly, when it comes to allegations against magistrates, for example, a commission of inquiry cannot order that a magistrate be suspended immediately. But what it can do is to get some of the facts that will allow the proper institutional mechanisms to kick into motion. For example, the JSC Act for judges, I should say, the JSC Act requires that there be a proper complaint with facts to substantiate it. The Commission of Inquiry can get that complaint and the facts to substantiate it. and then the JSC can take over and do the thorough investigation, including suspending the judges if there are any judges implicated. So what the Commission of Inquiry does is to work in tandem with the proper state institutions, because it can't, for example, take final decisions. And so we shouldn't expect that the recommendations from the Commission of Inquiry will be the final word on any issue, even though they are vitally important in kicking those processes into gear.
So is it being just an inquest going to be helpful then in transparency, in building confidence, not just in the judiciary, but ultimately in the entire process of this inquiry?
Yes, the fact that it is a Commission of Inquiry does have some benefits. It can move faster. It can go much further than perhaps a surface investigation can do. Because what a Commission of Inquiry does, like I said, it's inquisitorial. So it essentially has the sniffer dogs who can quickly run and find the evidence and point and say, this is where the evidence leads. And then the other bodies can take over and do a much deeper investigation. And particularly in this situation where you have quite senior officials in the police, for example, involved in some of the allegations. So if you have a Commission of Inquiry that is independent, that is transparent, where we can follow the proceedings as they play out, then it gets some of those processes unfolding much quicker. And it can also, because it has the power to order an interim report, some of those allegations don't have to wait until the end. Yeah. They can be immediately investigated by the other state institutions. For example, the SARS inquiry was a good example of this, in that immediately when the SARS inquiry issued an interim report, we know that Commissioner of SARS, Moyane, was immediately suspended and then fired. So there is benefit in a Commission of Inquiry because it moves much faster. The rules are much more flexible than a formal disciplinary proceeding or a formal criminal investigation.
Yeah, one wonders, however, because the political implications of this versus a person like Dan Moyane at the time then, or rather Mr. Moyane at the time, was slightly different. But I definitely get your point. Mbekezeli, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time here. It's certainly going to be an interesting minimum 6 months, and we'll certainly have a chat to you as things progress. Mbekezeli Benjamin, the Research and Advocacy Officer at Judges Matter.